You know, I got to be honest with you here, boss. You don't want to give me that gun. 'Cause I'd probably shoot you with it.
This is Sese with your Black Agenda Report morning shot for January 31st, 2011. On Sunday, the 23rd, Bomani Shakur, otherwise known as Keith Lamar, released a letter that details certain concessions made by prison authorities to him and the other inmates known as the Lucasville Hunger Strikers, Jason Robb, Namir Mateen, and Sadiq Hassan. The letter is entitled Power to the People, and Shakur informs us that he will be granted contact visits with his family and other regular rights afforded to the other death row inmates. What is good to see is that his ideological resolve is stronger than ever in the face of token concessions that are his quote-unquote rights. He is not bending over backwards to say thank you to the prison authorities because, indeed, it is the action of the people that forced the prison authorities to grant concessions. The authorities thought they could sweep the hunger strikers under the rug because of the perceived invisibility of prisoners and political prisoners more especially. On this note, Shakur repeats, quote, "The system is bogus and sold to those with money. In other words, if you don't have the capital, you get the punishment. And justice, like everything else in this capitalist nightmare, is nothing more than a commodity that is reserved for the highest bidder. Need I say more?" Unquote. However, as we all know, concessions speak to lesser demands, and right now the greater demand is getting these cats off death row. It is highly likely that the Ohio State Correctional Facility will use these token concessions to better ease the transition to killing them. So Bomani Shakur concludes by proposing the practical step forward. Ultimately, the goal is to compose a petition similar in scope to the ones that were recently circulated, which will then be presented to the governor with the demand that he either issue a general amnesty with respect to all of the Lucasville cases, or in the alternative, convene a panel of qualified experts to determine whether or not a general amnesty is warranted. On Friday the 21st, Chicago police officer Jon Burge was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for perjury and obstruction of justice for being deeply implicated with the torture of black suspects in the 1970s and 1980s.
Jon Burge is to report in prison in March. The fact that he'll spend time behind bars is seen by some as justice, even though it's been decades since torture allegations surfaced.
It was established that Mr. Burge committed perjury, and he receives a very serious sentence. And I think it's important to send a message to people that this sort of thing doesn't happen in a civilized society, doesn't happen in a law enforcement system, and it should never happen again.
He's a tough man, and he'll get through this. He'll surrender on March 16th and begin to serve his sentence, and we'll work vigilantly to try to get him out as soon as possible.
Burge defended himself in court. "I'm not a perfect person," he told the judge, "but I'm not the person portrayed in the media." The judge said she did not believe Burge and that he lacked respect for the legal process. Even so, some were still not satisfied.
This is a complete injustice. 4.5 years where men have spent 20 and 30 years in prison is outrageous.
Burge gets 4 years, 5 years, and he goes home. That's not right. My brother spent 16 years on death row for something he didn't do.
Burge was not remorseful, let alone apologetic for the torture that went down. One can gather that the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police wasn't either, being that they voted to foot the entire legal bill for Burge's defense in 2008. Last week, Burge's supporters demanded he be sentenced with leniency because of his military service. They called Burge a great police officer. Given his record of lying about torture, we can only guess what he was doing during his military service. Burge is scheduled to start serving a 4.5-year prison sentence in March and will continue to collect his pension check of more than $3,000 a month during his stay. 2 decades of torture, and the punishment for it, if you can call it that, is 4.5 years paid leave, with the expectation that his lawyers are going to push for an earlier release. This is the reversal of making an example out of someone. Usually that implies discouraging their behavior, but hell, some rookie can obviously see Burge's example and then torture, lie about it, and expect the minimal sentencing and get paid while in prison. With a black president in office that has sanctioned the use of torture in the pursuit of mislabeled national security, the relative wrist slap of Burge can be considered normal under this regime. On Tuesday the 25th, the National Day of Action to protest FBI targeting of peace and justice activists was observed. Recall that this past September 2010, the FBI raided the homes and offices of several Chicago and Minneapolis activists involved in the anti-war committee. Since then, 23 activists in the Palestine Solidarity Struggle and the aforementioned groups have been subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury. These numbers do not include countless Wisconsin, North Carolina, Oakland, and San Jose activists who have been questioned by the FBI. Longtime movement lawyer Lynn Stewart has said, quote, "The government is once again arresting, subpoenaing, and tormenting movement people, hoping they will become informants. We stand strong with the resistors who elect not to become part of the same prosecution team that has terrorized the world. Our principle of non-collaboration has so far proved robust. There has been no wavering. Our support must continue to convince everyone involved that these are issues of principle. There can be no compromise. Resistors must be defended to the utmost of our strength and abilities." Unquote. One could say as well that defense of resistors also comes through internal security measures. As we are continually learning, this group and others like it have been the targets of serious infiltration by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and other misnamed law enforcement agencies. It was recently confirmed that an FBI informant who was going by the name of Karen Sullivan successfully infiltrated the anti-war committee and put herself in an administrative, political educator, and decision-making position for 2.5 years.
Officer Sullivan participated, sometimes even serving as chairperson, in weekly anti-war committee meetings here in this very room, where everyone present has a say in the decisions that the committee makes. Officer Sullivan had a key to this office, which was later used by the FBI on September 24th to enter the office, search it, seize our computers, financial records, and other materials. For the last year or so, she has assisted with the bookkeeping for the anti-war committee and had unimpeded access to our financial records. On several occasions, Officer Sullivan gave public speeches on behalf of the anti-war committee, including on Colombia and Palestine.
Sullivan also sabotaged the Solidarity mission to Gaza by first becoming part of the Solidarity mission's logistical planning and then informing authorities that she, along with 2 of the other activists from Minnesota, would be arriving for the purposes of meeting with the Palestinian women's group. In her final months, she resorted to blatant provocateur tactics, trying to lead activists into conversations that they did not know how to respond to. Among other things, the woman who called herself Karen Sullivan babysat activist children, brought them stuffed animals that were used as spying devices, and actually met with another undercover agent at a School of the Americas protest in Columbia, Georgia. This should serve as a sobering reminder to all of us involved in this type of stuff. The man has his agents everywhere.
Thomas Merton Center in Pennsylvania, environmental groups, Greenpeace, all of these groups now have government spies that are insinuated into the groups. In fact, I will just say now I'm going to go back to talking as a peace activist. This is the second case that I personally, now I'm a retired FBI agent, and I've personally been in groups now where there has been a government informant apparently reporting on me.
I just met the most marvelous bunch of niggers. the most marvelous bunch of... You get him?